The Viridian battlecruiser dwarfed the human diplomatic vessel as it loomed in the blackness of space. On the bridge of the HSS Tenacity, Lieutenant Commander Riker Davenport stood rigid, jaw clenched, as the alien message played for the fifth time. Your Galactic Union protocols are quaint suggestions, humans. The Viridian Concord recognizes no jurisdiction in this sector. Clear the Orion shipping lanes or face immediate disintegration. Admiral Hassan's face appeared on the comms panel. Lieutenant Commander, you have your orders. Withdraw the Tenacity to Proxima Outpost. The Union Council is convening for emergency talks. With respect, Admiral, withdrawal guarantees Viridian expansion into 3 unprotected human colonies. This isn't a discussion, Davenport. The Tenacity isn't equipped for this confrontation. The Viridians have 17 vessels to our 1. Riker's fingers traced the edge of his terminal, where a photograph was tucked beneath the display. His sister's settlement on Proxima 4, directly in the Viridian expansion path. Understood, Admiral. Withdrawing immediately. The communication ended, but Riker remained frozen, staring at the mammoth warship. His XO, Lieutenant Kaida Matsuri, approached cautiously. Commander, navigation is calculating withdrawal vectors. Riker's voice was barely audible. My sister's defense system on Proxima 4 relied on our presence here. This withdrawal is a death sentence for 30,000 civilians. The Galactic Union Treaty is something the Viridians are using against us, Riker finished. They exploit our adherence to rules while breaking everyone themselves. He strode to the tactical station where Ensign Varro Emmerich monitored the sensor array. What's their shield configuration? Emmerich's fingers flew across the console. Standard Viridian triple lattice. Impenetrable to our conventional armaments. Riker's eyes narrowed. What about unconventional ones? Lieutenant Matsuri stepped closer. Sir, what are you suggesting? The Viridians think human rules are a joke, guidelines we follow out of weakness. He turned to face the bridge crew, his voice taking on a dangerous edge. They've never faced Marines from the Jovian campaign. Riker activated the ship-wide comm. All hands, this is the commander. Prepare for hyperspace jump, not to Proxima Outpost, but to the Helios Forge. Gasps echoed across the bridge. Sir, Matsuri whispered, the Forge is a restricted military installation. Without authorization. I'm not asking for a weapon, Lieutenant. I'm retrieving one that already belongs to me. Riker's eyes gleamed with fierce determination. Before I commanded the Tenacity, I led Project Helios. The prototype, Dreadnought, was mothballed when the Union Peace Accords were signed. The Helios-class Dreadnought was never commissioned, Emmerich said, eyes wide. Precisely. It exists in a loophole. Never commissioned, never decommissioned. Just waiting. Riker turned back to the viewport. And I still have the command. Codes. The Tenacity engaged its hyperdrive, vanishing from the Viridian sensors as Riker contemplated the gambit ahead. The Viridians had miscalculated. They assumed humans followed rules out of fear or weakness. They would soon learn the truth. Sometimes humans followed rules because the alternatives were too terrifying to contemplate. As the stars streaked past, Riker's mind filled with the specifications of the vessel he had helped design, a warship unlike any the galaxy had seen. The Viridians thought humanity was soft. They would discover just how mistaken they were. The Helios Forge hung suspended in the amber glow of a dying star, a military installation purposely built in a system no one wanted, radiation levels too high for comfort, resources too sparse for profit. Perfect for hiding humanity's darkest projects. As the Tenacity approached, Lieutenant Commander Davenport stared at the massive cylindrical structure. Somewhere inside that rotating behemoth lay the fruit of 5 years' labor, the HSS Reckoning. Approaching docking procedures, Ensign Emmerich announced. Forge defenses have us locked, Transmitting my personal authorization codes, Riker said, fingers dancing across his console, inputting a sequence known only to him and two deceased admirals. For several tense moments, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the enormous bay doors of the forge began to part. "I can't believe that worked," breathed Lieutenant Matsuri. "The forge AI recognizes me," Riker explained. "And it's programmed to be flexible with protocol in certain scenarios." He stood. "Lieutenant Matsuri, you have the con. I need a boarding party. Just Emmerich and Specialist Orla Kalani from engineering." Within 30 minutes, the three officers stood in a cavernous hangar, their flashlights cutting through darkness that hadn't been disturbed in years. Before them loomed a shape hidden beneath massive shrouds. "Is that it?" Emmerich whispered, his voice echoing. Riker approached a dusty terminal and placed his palm on the reader. Light bloomed around them as systems slowly awakened. "Welcome back, Commander Davenport," a synthetic voice announced. "Project Helios has been in standby for 1,127 days. Initiate full reactivation. Authorization Davenport Omega-7. The shrouds covering the massive shape began to retract automatically, revealing gleaming black hull sections etched with faint blue lines. As more of the covering withdrew, Specialist Kalani gasped. "That's not just a warship," she said. "That's a planet killer." The HSS Reckoning stretched nearly a kilometer in length, its hull studded with weapon ports unlike anything in the current human fleet. Where traditional vessels followed the Galactic Union's standardized configurations, the Reckoning embodied pure offensive capability. "Not a planet killer," Riker corrected quietly. "A star killer. The gravitational lance can destabilize a star's core, triggering premature nova. It was designed as the ultimate deterrent. A weapon so terrible no species would risk facing it." "But the peace accords," Emmerich began, "were signed specifically to prevent this ship from being commissioned." Riker's eyes reflected the blue, lighting now illuminating the dreadnought. "The other Council races learned of Project Helios. They feared what humanity might become with such power. The Accords were their solution, disarmament in exchange for guaranteed protection. Protection they're now failing to provide," Kalani observed. Riker nodded grimly. "I need you both to understand what we're doing. Once we take this ship, there's no going back. We'll be court-martialed if we survive." Ensign Emmerich straightened. "Sir, my family settled New Montana. It's directly in the Viridian's path." Specialist Kalani checked her toolkit. "I didn't join the fleet to watch bullies destroy our colonies." Riker felt a weight lift from his shoulders. "Then let's wake this beast up." For the next several hours, they worked feverishly to bring the dormant systems online. The Reckoning had been built to last, its systems preserved in a state of near readiness. As Riker settled into the captain's chair on the automated bridge, he ran his hand along the armrest. "Initiate neural interface," he commanded. The ship responded immediately, connection ports rising from the chair's arm. Riker rolled up his sleeve, revealing the neural implants he'd received during Project Helios. "Sir," Kalani said cautiously, "those legacy implants could kill me, possibly." Riker connected the ports to his arm. "But they'll also make me one with the most powerful weapon humanity ever created." Pain lanced through his body as ancient systems synchronized with his nervous system. Through gritted teeth, he managed to speak. "HSS Reckoning, acknowledge new mission parameters." The ship's AI responded in a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Parameters acknowledged. Target, Viridian Concord. Objective, protection of human colonies. As Riker's consciousness expanded to encompass the vast systems of the dreadnought, one thought burned through his mind. The Viridians were about to learn what happened when the rules no longer applied. Hyperspace tore open like a wound in reality. As the HSS Reckoning emerged at the edge of the Orion shipping lanes, The massive dreadnought's systems hummed with barely contained energy, its black hull absorbing rather than reflecting the distant starlight. On the bridge, now fully illuminated and staffed with a skeleton crew from the Tenacity, Lieutenant Commander Davenport sat unnaturally still. Neural interfaces pulsed with blue light where they connected to his forearms, allowing him to feel the ship as an extension of his own body. 17 Viridian vessels detected, he announced, the information flowing directly into his consciousness. Their formation indicates they weren't expecting company. Lieutenant Matsuri, who had reluctantly joined the mission after securing the Tenacity at the forge, studied the tactical display. They're surrounding a civilian transport cluster, mining ships from the Proxima colonies. Riker's eyes remained closed as he processed data at machine speeds. Initiating communications. Across the Viridian fleet, communication officers suddenly found their systems overridden as Riker projected his message simultaneously to all vessels. Viridian Concord vessels, this is Lieutenant Commander Riker Davenport of the Human Systems Alliance. You are operating in violation of Galactic Union Treaty provisions. Release the human transports and withdraw from this sector immediately. The response came quickly, a reptilian Viridian commander appearing on the main view screen. Commander Vexarn's scales shimmered with iridescent anger. Unidentified human vessel, your presence is noted and dismissed. This sector falls under new Viridian protection. Submit to inspection or be destroyed. The alien's lipless mouth curved into what passed for a smile. We count 1 vessel against our 17. Your human rules of engagement have delivered you. To us as a gift. Riker opened his eyes, a faint blue glow emanating from them, a side effect of the neural interface. You misunderstand, Commander Vexarn. I'm not here to engage. He paused, letting the tension build. I'm here to accept your surrender. Laughter erupted from the Viridian bridge crew. Commander Vexarn flared his neck frills in their species' expression of amusement. Your species' humor continues to baffle me, human. Allow me to respond appropriately. He gestured to someone off-screen. Target their vessel. Full disruptor barrage. The Viridian flagship fired first, followed quickly by 3 support cruisers. Energy weapons designed to tear through conventional shields converged on the Reckoning's position and dissipated harmlessly against an invisible barrier. Riker didn't flinch as the ship absorbed the attack through its gravitational defense system, technology that didn't deflect energy, but rather redirected it into dimensional subspace. Interesting approach, Riker commented calmly. Perhaps I should demonstrate ours. With a thought, he activated a single forward battery. A pencil-thin beam of concentrated light, barely visible in the vacuum of space, lanced out from the Reckoning and touched the nearest Viridian destroyer. The vessel didn't explode. It simply ceased to exist, converted entirely to energy that the Reckoning partially harvested. Stunned silence fell across all communication channels. That was a conversion cannon, Riker explained conversationally. It transforms matter directly into energy. Quite efficient, actually. Your vessel's mass has now become approximately 20% of our reserve power. On the view screen, Commander Vexarn's scales had paled to a sickly green. What manner of weapon is this? One that was never supposed to exist, Riker answered. Created by humans who followed the rules until we realized some species would never do the same. He leaned forward. I'll repeat my offer once. Release the human transports and withdraw from this sector, permanently. The Viridian commander's eyes darted to displays off-screen, presumably showing readouts of the Reckoning's capabilities, or attempting to. The Dreadnought's stealth systems revealed only what Riker wanted them to see. This is unprecedented. I must consult with the Concord High Command. You have 5 minutes, Riker stated. After that, I'll proceed with the systematic conversion of your fleet into our power reserves. As the communication channel closed, Specialist Kalani approached the command chair. Sir, the neural interface is showing increased strain on your central nervous system. Medical protocols recommend disconnection after 30 minutes of continuous use. Noted, Riker replied, though they both knew he had no intention of disconnecting while the Viridians remained a threat. For 4 minutes and 38 seconds, the opposing fleets faced each other in silence. Then, the Viridian vessels began moving away from the human transports, forming a new defensive pattern. The communication channel reopened. Commander Vexarn appeared, his posture noticeably more rigid. "We are withdrawing as requested. But know this, human. The Concord will not forget this encounter. We have rules too, and they demand equivalence." Riker understood the implied threat. "As long as those rules keep you away from human settlements, we'll get along fine. Violate our space again, and I'll return with more than just a demonstration." As the Viridian fleet retreated into hyperspace, the bridge crew of the Reckoning finally allowed themselves to breathe. But Riker remained connected to the ship, monitoring the departing vessels through its advanced sensor array. "Sir," Lieutenant Matsuri said quietly, "the transport captains are requesting communication. They want to know who saved them." Riker finally permitted himself a small smile. "Tell them it was the Human Systems Alliance." Not me, he thought, not this ship. Because what he had started here was bigger than one vessel or one commander. It was humanity serving notice to the galaxy. The rules had changed. Admiral Hassan's holographic projection wore an expression that mixed fury with awe. "Do you have any idea what you've done, Davenport? The diplomatic fallout is catastrophic." Riker stood at ease in the Reckoning's conference room, his uniform still crisp despite not having slept in 60 hours. The neural interface ports on his arms were temporarily covered with medical patches. "I prevented the massacre of unarmed human colonists, Admiral, by stealing an unauthorized weapon of mass destruction." Hassan's hologram paced in its confined projection area. "The Galactic Union Security Council is in emergency session. The Viridians have filed formal accusations of treaty violations that we cannot deny. The Viridians were violating those same treaties by attacking our shipping lanes," Riker countered. "They considered our diplomatic approach to be weakness." Admiral Hassan stopped pacing. "The President has been in closed-door meetings for 16 hours straight. Do you understand what you've unleashed? Every species in the Union is now demanding information about Project Helios. Perhaps they should be more concerned about why humanity felt the need to create it in the first place." Riker's voice remained steady. "The Reckoning was built because our analysts predicted exactly this scenario. Alien powers testing our boundaries, seeing our cooperation as vulnerability." The Admiral's expression softened slightly. "You're not entirely wrong, Riker, but your actions have forced our hand. We can't put this genie back in the bottle." "Then don't try, sir. Use it." "Use it how, exactly? By threatening to destroy any species that disagrees with us? That's not who we are." Riker approached the hologram. "With respect, Admiral, that's exactly who we need to be right now. Not conquerors, protectors. The Viridians retreated because they finally understood one thing. Humans have limits to our patience." The communication briefly scattered as the ship's systems detected a proximity alert. Lieutenant Matsuri's voice came over the intercom. "Commander, we've got incoming. 5 vessels, Union markings, 1 Kelrani, 2 Protectorate, and 2 human battle cruisers." Admiral Hassan's expression turned grim. "That would be your escort. Home, Commander. You and your crew are to surrender the Reckoning and return to Earth for court-martial proceedings." "Understood, sir." Riker nodded. "If that's what's necessary." The Admiral studied him carefully. "You're accepting this rather easily for someone who just committed high treason." Riker allowed himself a small smile. "The Reckoning has already served its purpose, Admiral. Word of what happened at Orion is spreading through every colony world and vessel. The Viridians struck at what they thought was our weakness, our adherence to rules. I showed them our rules exist because we're powerful enough to create far worse alternatives." A new proximity alert sounded. Matsuri's voice returned, this time with noticeable confusion. Sir, we're detecting additional vessels approaching at high speed, civilian ships from the outer colonies. Dozens of them forming a protective cordon around us. Admiral Hassan's eyes widened. What is this, Davenport? I believe, sir, Riker replied calmly, that's humanity voting on their preferred approach to galactic politics. Over the next hour, the situation grew increasingly complex. The civilian vessels, mining ships, transport freighters, colonial, patrol boats positioned themselves between the reckoning and the approaching Union fleet. Communications flooded in from colony worlds across 3 sectors, all with variations of the same message. The reckoning had done what the Union failed to do: protect human interests. Admiral Hassan returned to the communication with news. The President has made a decision. You're to bring the reckoning to Earth orbital dock immediately. For decommissioning? Riker asked. For official commissioning, Hassan replied, surprising him. If the Union wants to discuss human defense capabilities, they can do it while looking at what we're capable of building. For the first time since taking the reckoning, Riker felt the weight of his decision fully. This changes the balance of power. It already has, the Admiral agreed. The Arcturian and Centauri representatives have already approached us about strengthening our mutual defense pacts. The Kelrani are suddenly eager to resolve our border disputes. As the reckoning changed course for Earth, escorted now by both military and civilian vessels, Riker found Lieutenant Matsuri at his side. I still don't understand why you're so willing to face court-martial, she said quietly. You must have known this outcome was possible. Riker watched the stars through the viewport. Sometimes, Lieutenant, the rules exist not to restrict us, but to show us exactly where the boundaries lie. He turned to meet her gaze. And what happens when we cross them? The massive ship accelerated toward Earth, carrying with it not just a weapon, but a message that would reshape humanity's place among the stars. The Grand Assembly Hall of the Galactic Union headquarters on Earth fell silent as Lieutenant Commander Riker Davenport was escorted in by Union security. Despite being charged with multiple violations of military protocol, he wore his full dress uniform, metals glinting under the chamber's bright lights. The semicircular chamber held representatives from all 27 member species of the Union. At its center stood the Judgment Circle, where Riker now took his position. Above, in tiered seating, the Human Systems Alliance delegation sat rigidly, their expressions carefully neutral. High Arbiter Zyla Noor, her silver hair swept into an elaborate braid signifying her judicial authority, addressed the assembly. This special tribunal is convened to address the actions of Lieutenant Commander Riker Davenport, who stands accused of theft of military property, violation of the peace accords of 2186, unauthorized engagement with a foreign power, and insubordination. Her gaze fell on Riker. How do you respond to these charges? Before Riker could speak, the Viridian representative, Supreme Commander Vexarn himself, rose from his seat. High Arbiter, the Viridian Concord wishes to amend our formal complaint. We seek not punishment, but understanding. The reptilian's voice had lost its previous arrogance. Evidence has emerged that our border operations may have exceeded agreed parameters. Murmurs swept through the chamber. Arbiter Noor's eyes narrowed. Explain, Commander Vexarn. The Viridian shifted uncomfortably. Certain factions within our military command were operating without full Concord authorization. Their actions against human settlements were not sanctioned policy. That's convenient timing for this revelation, noted the Arcturian representative, Ambassador Ilox, his multiple eye stalks swiveling toward the Viridian. Nevertheless, continued Arbiter Noor, the charges against Lieutenant Commander Davenport remain. The existence of the vessel designated HSS Reckoning represents a clear violation of Section 12 of the Peace Accords. Now Admiral Hassan stood. High Arbiter, if I may address the Assembly? At her nod, Hassan activated the central holographic display. Three-dimensional images of deep space appeared, showing massive construction facilities hidden in nebulae and asteroid fields. These installations were discovered by our intelligence services following the Orion incident. They belong to the Kelrani Empire, the Talaxian Protectorate, and yes, he paused, the Viridian Conquered. All contain vessels and weapons specifically, prohibited by the very accords that humanity is accused of violating. Shocked exclamations echoed throughout the chamber. The Kelrani representative immediately began a heated denial, only to fall silent when Admiral Hassan displayed more detailed scans. Every major power in this room has been developing prohibited weapons in secret, Hassan continued. The only difference is that humanity actually used ours to protect innocents, not threaten them. Riker finally spoke, his voice steady. I stand by my actions. When faced with the imminent destruction of human colonies and the clear failure of our treaties to protect them, I made the only choice I could. High Arbiter Noor studied him thoughtfully. A noble sentiment, Commander, but dangerous precedent. If every officer decided which treaties to follow based on personal judgment— With respect, Arbiter, Riker replied, treaties are only paper. They survive on trust, which had clearly been broken long before I took the reckoning. The chamber fell into contemplative silence until an unexpected voice spoke. Elia Mendoza, the Human Systems President, rose from the highest tier. This tribunal should consider not just Commander Davenport's actions, but what brought us to this point. Her authoritative voice carried throughout the chamber. For decades, humanity has honored every provision of the peace accords, while other signatories secretly prepared for war. Perhaps the true violation was not Commander Davenport's, but our collective failure to uphold the spirit of cooperation these accords were meant to embody. Ambassador Ilox of the Arcturian Collective clicked, his mandibles in the gesture of agreement. The human speaks wisdom. This revelation of widespread treaty violations suggests a deeper problem than one commander's actions. For hours, the tribunal deliberated, with representatives from every species presenting arguments. Through it all, Riker stood unmoving in the judgment circle, occasionally meeting the eyes of Commander Vexarn, who seemed increasingly uncomfortable under his steady gaze. Finally, High Arbiter Noor called for order. This tribunal finds itself in an unprecedented situation. Evidence suggests widespread violation of the peace accords by multiple signatories, casting doubt on the validity of charges against Lieutenant Commander Davenport. She paused, considering her next words carefully. Therefore, this tribunal rules that Lieutenant Commander Davenport acted in accordance with the primary duty of all Union officers, the protection of civilian life when treaties fail to do so. Relief washed through the human delegation, though Riker's expression remained unchanged. However, continued the Arbiter, this ruling creates a dangerous new reality. If the peace accords have been undermined to this degree, what framework governs our coexistence moving forward? President Mendoza stood again. I propose a new framework. Honest strength rather than false promises. The HSS Reckoning will remain commissioned, patrolling human space openly, not hidden away. And we invite all Union species to similarly acknowledge their defensive capabilities. Transparency and strength, Ambassador Ilox mused. An unusual approach, but perhaps the only honest one, Vexarn admitted reluctantly. The Concord will consider this proposal. As the session adjourned, Admiral Hassan approached Riker at the edge of the judgment circle. Congratulations, Captain Davenport. Riker raised an eyebrow. Captain, your promotion comes with command of the Reckoning, officially this time. Hassan's expression grew serious. You've changed everything, you know. The balance of power, diplomatic relations, even how we approach treaty negotiations. For better or worse? Riker asked. Hassan glanced toward the departing Viridian delegation, where Commander Vexarn was engaged in intense discussion with his aides. That remains to be seen. But one thing is certain. No one will mistake human adherence to rules for weakness again. As they exited the chamber, Hassan handed Riker a data tablet. Your first official mission as captain. The Proxima colonies need a proper defensive perimeter established. Riker accepted the tablet, thinking of his sister and the other colonists who could now sleep safely. Rules still matter, sir, he said quietly. But now everyone knows there are lines that shouldn't be crossed. The Admiral nodded. Precisely. And you've shown the galaxy exactly where those lines are drawn, with a warship named Reckoning. 3 months after the tribunal, the HSS Reckoning hovered in high orbit above Proxima Thor, its massive silhouette casting a faint shadow on the planet's night side. The vessel had become both symbol and shield, a constant reminder that humanity would no longer rely solely on diplomatic agreements for security. Captain Riker Davenport stood in the newly completed observation deck, watching as shuttlecraft ferried personnel between the surface and the growing defense platform. Construction drones swarmed around the framework of the Proxima Sentinel Array, humanity's first openly acknowledged defense system that incorporated technology previously forbidden by the peace accords. Quite a view, isn't it? Riker turned. To find President Mendoza approaching, her visit to the Reckoning unannounced, but not unexpected. Political leaders across human space had been making pilgrimages to see the vessel that had rewritten the rules of interstellar politics. Madam President, he acknowledged with a crisp salute. I wasn't informed of your arrival, she smiled. Some visits work better without fanfare, Captain. She joined him at the viewport. Especially when I'm here to discuss the consequences of your actions. Positive or negative consequences? Riker asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. Both, as with most pivotal moments in history. She gestured toward the defense platform. 17 similar arrays are under construction across human space. 5 separate species have approached us about mutual defense pacts. The Viridians have withdrawn all military assets to within their recognized borders. Riker nodded. And the negatives? Arms development has accelerated across all major powers. The Kelrani unveiled their phase shift technology last week. The Talaxians are rumored to be working on something that manipulates dark energy. President Mendoza sighed. We've entered a new era of open military competition, Captain. Some would say an arms race. Better an honest arms race than dishonest peace, Riker replied. At least now we can see the threats clearly. A soft chime interrupted their conversation as Lieutenant Matsuri approached with a data tablet. Pardon the intrusion, Captain, but you asked to be notified immediately. The Viridian diplomatic vessel has arrived for the scheduled talks. Riker took the tablet, reviewing the information quickly. Thank you, Lieutenant. Please inform them I'll join the diplomatic team shortly. After Matsuri departed, President Mendoza raised an eyebrow. The infamous Commander Vexarn requested you personally for these negotiations, did he not? He did, Riker confirmed. Apparently our encounter made quite an impression. That's precisely why I'm here, Captain. The President's tone grew more serious. These negotiations will establish the template for our future interspecies relations. The question before us is, do we use our newfound respect to build bridges or walls? Riker considered her words carefully. The Reckoning wasn't built to conquer, Madam President. It was built so we wouldn't need to. Precisely. And that distinction matters enormously in what happens next. She turned fully to face him. The Galactic Union is reforming around a new principle, transparent strength. Your actions forced every species to acknowledge their true capabilities and intentions. And now? Now we determine if honesty leads to conflict or cooperation. She handed him a small data crystal. This contains my authorization for the most sensitive aspect of these negotiations. The Viridians have proposed a joint security initiative, shared technology, coordinated patrols. Riker's surprise must have shown on his face because the President smiled. Yes, the same Viridians who were threatening our colonies 3 months ago. It seems Commander Vexarn was impressed not just by the Reckoning's firepower, but by what you chose not to do with it. The realization dawned on Riker. We could have destroyed their entire fleet, but you demanded only what was right, withdrawal from human space and safety for our colonists. She nodded toward the data crystal. They respect strength used with restraint, Captain. A lesson worth remembering as you enter these negotiations. As President Mendoza departed, Riker returned his gaze to the viewport, watching as a Viridian diplomatic vessel approached the Reckoning, escorted by human fighters. The contrast couldn't have been more stark. 3 months ago, these species had been on the brink of war. In the diplomatic chamber 30 minutes later, Riker found himself face-to-face with Commander Vexarn once again. The Viridian officer had exchanged his battle armor for formal diplomatic attire, though his posture remained military precise. Captain Davenport. Vexarn greeted him with the Viridian salute. Right fist pressed to left shoulder, a gesture of respect between warriors. Our last meeting was considerably less civilized. Different circumstances call for different approaches, Commander, Riker replied, returning the salute. Indeed, my people have a saying, true strength reveals itself in the moment of victory. When you had our fleet at your mercy, you demanded only what was just. The Viridian's scales shimmered slightly, a sign of emotional emphasis. It caused considerable reconsideration among our high command. The diplomatic teams from both sides began the formal negotiation process, but Riker found himself engaged in a separate, more personal conversation with Vexarn. Your reckoning changed everything, the Viridian admitted quietly. Not just the balance of power, but how we perceived humanity. We mistook your adherence to rules for weakness. A common misconception, Riker observed. Rules aren't chains that bind us. They're the standards we choose to uphold because we're strong enough to do so. A perspective my people are beginning to appreciate. Vexarn's expression turned contemplative. The irony is not lost on me, Captain. Your breaking of rules has led to a stronger foundation for them. As the negotiations progressed, Riker found himself reflecting on the journey that had brought him here. From the desperate gamble to retrieve the reckoning to this moment of potential alliance with a former adversary, all because he had shown the galaxy that humanity's compliance with rules had always been a choice, not a necessity. The formal ceremony concluding the negotiations took place on the observation deck, with the backdrop of Proxima IV and the growing defense platform serving as silent witnesses. As Captain Davenport and Commander Vexarn signed the historic Security Cooperation Accord, representatives from 12 other species observed from the sidelines, all potential signatories to similar agreements. Later, as the diplomatic contingents departed, Riker stood alone on the bridge of the Reckoning, contemplating the ship that had transformed from forbidden secret to symbol of a new era. Lieutenant Matsuri approached with the day's final reports. The Arcturians and Centauri have formally requested similar negotiations, sir. It seems everyone wants to be our friend now. Not our friend, Lieutenant, Riker corrected. Our equal. And that makes all the difference. He gazed out at the stars. The same stars that had witnessed humanity's ascension from a single world to a respected power among ancient civilizations. They thought our rules were a joke, he said quietly, until they understood why we created them in the first place.